the political revolution. However, I'm sad to say so many people ask us why. Why care? Why vote? Why participate? Why spend time and energy on a campaign? That's an option. And I'll tell you why. This is a movement we've all been waiting for. Charlie and I are both from California. Obviously, we're brothers. But we grew up in Northern California in an agricultural area. Now, I'd be lying to you if I told you that we didn't have a childhood, but a lot of friends who I hold very dear in my heart did not. They did not have the same advantages that we had. Their parents worked hard. They did not have the option to go see doctors. They did not have the option to go see a dentist when they needed care. They did not have the option to get an education the way that we could, and it was not their fault because their parents worked I can't say it, they worked to the bone. They worked themselves to the bone, and still they did not have enough to get by. So why are we here? Why are we registering young voters? Why are we being public about our support for Bernie Sanders? Because we're standing up for our neighbors. We're standing up for our families, for the next generation, and for our future. And why? We're standing with Bernie Sanders because he has stood up for all of us over the history of his career. Regardless of race, gender, sexual orientation, economic background. So, we know that you've been waiting for him. Let's get a win in California. I want everyone out on June 7th before you need to take action. This is a movement and it demands action, okay? Let's make this a win for Bernie, for our country, and for all of us. And now, please welcome to the stage, Senator Bernie Sanders.
Lancaster, thank you. This is a wonderful, wonderful turnout, and I appreciate everybody for being here. And I want to thank the couple of hundred people outside who couldn't get in. Thank you guys too. Let me thank Arthur Henke, Ruth Sanchez, and Max and Charlie Carver for those great introductions. All right, Lancaster, are you ready for a political revolution? Let me briefly tell you why we are going to win California on June 7th. We're going to win because we are doing rallies like this and grassroots activities all over this state. And we're going not just to LA and San Francisco and San Diego, we're going to small towns and medium-sized towns. We are going to towns that no presidential candidate has ever gone to. going to win because by the end of this campaign here in California, we will have spoken face to face with over 200,000 Californians. Now, Max and Charlie talked a little bit about political involvement, and I want to say a word about that. What the political revolution means, and by the way, congratulations, you are now part of the revolution. It means that we are going to create a government which works for all of us, not just the 1%. It means that we are going to create a government where the needs of ordinary people are heard, not just wealthy campaign contributors. It means that we are going to open up the Democratic Party so that all of you can come in and have your voices heard. Democracy is not about billionaires buying elections. Democracy is not when 2 years ago in the general elections, 63% of the American people did not vote. Democracy means you and you and you have got to stand up, fight back, and make sure we have a government that represents you and your families. And if I'm elected president, we are going to open up the Democratic Party wide open. And I want each and every one of you to march right in and to demand that the Democratic Party makes it clear that it is on the working people, not Wall Street. Now, this campaign is going to win because we are raising the issues and fighting the fights that need to be fought for working families. I am sick and tired of a government which worries about tax breaks for billionaires but ignores the needs of low-income and working families. Together, we are going to fundamentally change national priorities. But here is the main point I want to make this evening. Anyone here thinks that I can do it alone, you are sorely mistaken. No president can do it alone. We need to do it together. What we need to do is to start a serious discussion, and I want to do it tonight, about what the real issues facing our country are and how we go forward. And what I want to say to you is the real issues and what's important in America are not necessarily going to be seen on corporate television. You, each and every person in this room and in this country is going to have to go into their heart and determine what are the real issues. And here are some of those issues. I am very worried that we are losing our democratic foundation as a result of a disastrous Supreme Court decision called Citizens United. What Citizens United said to the billionaire class, it said, okay, guys, you already own much of the country. Now we're going to allow you to buy the United States government. And this campaign says, no, you won't. Not only are we going to overturn Citizens United, we're going to move toward public funding of elections. Now, what that means is I would love to see people in this room running for office, whether it's school board, city council, state legislature. And I want to see you do that without having to beg millionaires for campaign contributions. Right now, we have the absurd situation where Donald Trump, you all know Donald Trump, Donald Trump, who is a billionaire, is getting help from other billionaires to become president. So our message to Donald Trump is, you know what? Billionaires are not going to run this country. People will. And while we are on the subject of our good friend Donald Trump, let me tell you why Donald Trump will not become president of the United States. He will not become president because we are defeating him in every national poll. And in every state poll, including California. Donald Trump will not become president because the American people will not elect a candidate who insults Latinos and Mexicans, who insults Muslims and women, who insults veterans and African Americans. The American people know that our strength is in our diversity. Some of us are black and some white and some Latino and some Asian American. Some are Native Americans. We have people in this room who have come from every corner of the world. That is America. That is our strength. And the American people understand that we are strongest when we come together. We will not allow Trump to divide us up. Now, this campaign is going to win because we are talking about real issues, and one of the issues we are talking about is a rigged economy. Here is what a rigged economy is about. The United States today is the wealthiest nation in the history of the world, but nobody knows that. And you know why nobody knows it? It's because almost all of the new income and wealth is going to the top 1%. In other words, if you are a millionaire or a billionaire, you're doing just great. But if you are in the middle class or working class, you are struggling, and the likelihood is you are heading downward, not upward. This is what a rigged economy is about. A rigged economy is when the top 1/10% owns almost as much wealth as the bottom 90%. A rigged economy is when 20 wealthiest people own more wealth than the bottom 150 million people. A rigged economy is when one family, you all know the Walton family of Walmart? It turns out that the Walton family is the wealthiest family in the United States. It also turns out that the Walton family pays its employees at Walmart wages that are so low that many of those workers have to be on food stamps and Medicaid. And that means that the middle class has to subsidize the employees at Walmart because the Walton family is too cheap to pay them a living wage. So I say to the Walton family, get off of welfare, pay your workers a living wage. But it's not just the Walton family. I was in Anaheim the other day. Disney company there obviously runs Disneyland. The guy who is the head of Disney makes $42 million a year. Company makes billions of dollars in profit, but they are paying their workers there wages that are so low, many of these workers can't even find housing and have to stay in motels. So I say to Mr. Disney, now Disney is dead, the guy who was head of Disney. And by the way, when you talk about Disney, you know, they manufacture virtually all of their toys and all of their t-shirts. You know where they manufacture them? In China, that's right. And they pay wages there very, very low. I say to Disney, bring Mickey Mouse and Donald Duck back to America. Let's tell corporate America that they cannot continue to throw American workers out on the street and move to China. We need those jobs here in America. This campaign is not only about ending a corrupt campaign finance system and all of the super PACs, not only ending a rigged economy where people are working 2 or 3 jobs and almost all new wealth and income goes to the people on top. It is also about ending a broken criminal justice system. Every person in our country should be ashamed of the fact that we have more people in jail than any other country on earth. Right now, we are spending $80 billion a year to lock up 2.2 million people, disproportionately African American, Latino, and Native American. Now, what our job is to ask ourselves, why does that happen? Why are there so many people in jail? Here's one of the reasons. Throughout this country, there are communities in inner cities and in rural areas where youth unemployment is 30, 40, 50%. Kids cannot find jobs. And when young people cannot find jobs, when they're not in school, when they're hanging out on street corners, bad things can happen. What I think we should be doing is investing in our young people in jobs and education. Not in jails or incarceration. I want the young people of this country to be in school or to be earning a decent wage. I do not want them to be rotting away in a jail cell. Now, when we talk about criminal justice, it's not only making sure that our young people have jobs, it is also taking a hard look at local police departments all across this country. Now, I was a mayor in Burlington, Vermont for 8 years, and I worked very closely with our police department, and I've worked with police officers all over the country. The vast majority of police officers in this country are honest, hardworking, and they have a very difficult job. But like any other public official, if a police officer breaks the law, that officer must be held accountable. We must demilitarize local police departments. A good police department, and there are many of them, are part of the community. They are trusted by the community. They work with the community. A bad police department is one which looks like an invading army, and people are afraid. We have got to move toward making police departments reflect the diversity of the communities they serve. We have got to end corporate ownership of prisons and detention centers. Corporations should not be making money by imprisoning fellow Americans. We have got to create a law enforcement culture in this country which says that lethal force, shooting at someone, is the last resort, not the first resort. We have got to rethink the so-called war on drugs. Now, it turns out that over the last 30 years, millions of Americans have received police records for possession of marijuana. And if you are 19 years of age and you're going out and you're applying for a job and your employer says, well, tell me, have you ever been arrested? You say, well, yeah, I was arrested for marijuana. You know what? You may not get that job. A lot of lives have been ruined for arrest records on marijuana. Right now, at the federal level in Washington, we have a Federal Controlled Substance Act which lists marijuana as a Schedule I drug right next to heroin. Now, people can argue about the pluses and minuses of marijuana, but no sane person thinks marijuana is equivalent to a killer drug like heroin. And that is why, if elected president, I will take marijuana out of the federal controlled substance act. Possession of marijuana should not be a federal crime. Now, all of you also know that whether or not marijuana is legalized, and it has been made legal in 4 states plus D.C., that is a state decision, not a federal decision. All of you know that in November on your ballot there will be a proposition calling for the legalization of marijuana. I personally believe that legalizing marijuana is the right thing to do. But when we talk about drugs, let me get to another issue, which is a tough issue that we are going to have to deal with. How many people here, let me ask you a question, how many people here know of someone who is addicted to opiates or heroin? Raise your hand. Wow, all right. This is a major national crisis. All over this country, in my own state of Vermont, it is a very serious problem. All over this country, we have people who are addicted to opiates, they are addicted to heroin, and every single day there are people who are dying of overdosing on heroin or opiates. This is a crisis that we have got to address. And in my view, if we are going to address this crisis, we must approach it in a way that says that substance abuse and addiction are not criminal issues, they're health issues. And what that means, and what this campaign is about, is thinking big, not small. What that means is we need a revolution in mental health treatment. I mean, let us be honest. There are a lot of people, I don't know exactly how many, nobody does, but we're talking about millions of people in America who are dealing with addiction, they are dealing with suicidal impulses, and in some cases, they're dealing with homicidal impulses. And what we have got to do as a nation is make it a very high priority that when somebody is addressing or dealing with a mental health crisis, they get the treatment they need when they need it. And that means not having to fill out 18 forms and getting it 6 months from now. It means walking into a clinic and saying, I am addicted, I need help today. Now, this campaign is going to win because we are listening to ordinary Americans and not just super PACs and wealthy campaign contributors. It is my view in America, if you work 40 hours a week, you should not be living in poverty. And that is why, together, we are going to raise the federal minimum wage to a living wage, $15 an hour. It is not acceptable to me or to you that women in America earn 79 cents on the dollar compared to men. And that is why I know that every man here will stand with the women in the fight for pay equity. In America today, we have massive unemployment in very many parts of this country. Now, once a month, the federal government brings out a report on unemployment, and it says recently that unemployment in America is 5%. Anybody believe that? Well, you're right. It is not 5% because that number does not include people who are working part-time when they want to work full-time. It does not include people who have given up looking for work. Real unemployment in America is close to 10%. And right now, in America, all of you know that we have an infrastructure, roads and bridges and water systems that are in need of serious repair. In Vermont, we got potholes that are so big that people go into them, we lose them, we don't find them until the springtime when we thaw them out. Well, that's true all over America. Roads, bridges, our rail system needs massive repair. We should be hiring teachers, not firing teachers. We should be creating the best childcare pre-K system in the world. And that means creating millions of jobs, taking care of our youngest Americans. We can create up to 13 million good-paying jobs by rebuilding our infrastructure. We need a new trade policy. Now, trade is not a sexy issue. Media doesn't talk about it virtually at all. But what has happened over the last 30 years, we have lost tens of thousands of factories in America and millions of good-paying jobs. And tonight, I tell corporate America, if you want us to buy your products, start building them right here in America, not in China. This campaign is listening to young people. And what young people are asking me is, how does it happen that when they do the right thing and go out and get the best education they can, they end up $30,000, $50,000 in debt? Now think about it. Think outside of the box for a second. All of you know that we are in a competitive global economy, and if we are going to succeed as a nation, we need the best educated workforce in the world. Is that right? In other words, we should be encouraging, making it easier for all of our people to get the education they need. Now, here is a simple truth. And the truth is that 40, 50 years ago, if you had a high school diploma, you could probably go out and get yourself a pretty good job. That's true. The world has changed. The economy and technology have changed. People today need more education if they're going to get a decent job. And that is why I believe that when we talk about public education, it is not good enough to talk just about first grade through 12th grade. That was great years ago. Right now, when we talk about public education, it should include tuition-free public colleges and universities. Let me ask you a question. Does anybody really think that that is a radical idea? It is not. It really is a commonsensical idea. And by the way, as some of you may know, in countries like Germany and Scandinavia, do you know how much college costs? Anybody know? Zero. And let me tell you something else, which you may or may not know. 45 years ago in the state of California, going to the University of California, one of the great public universities in the world, was almost tuition-free. If we could provide tuition-free education in California 40 years ago, we damn well can do it today. Now, I grew up in a family that did not have a lot of money. My parents never went to college. And all over California, there are kids in the same position. There are kids whose parents never went to college. They don't know anybody who went to college. The idea of going to college is like going to the moon. It is not in their minds. What we have got to do is to say to every child in California and in Vermont and America that if you study hard in school, if you do well, regardless of the income of your family, yes, you will be able to get a college education. How many people here are dealing with student debt? Raise your hands. Now, I have talked to people all over the country who are $300,000, $400,000 in debt after graduate school. I've talked to kids who have dropped out of college, $60,000 in debt. I've talked to people who have been paying off their student debt for decades. That is crazy. And that is why I believe that anybody with student debt in this country should have the right to refinance those loans at the lowest interest rates they can find. Too many people are stuck with interest rates of 6, 8, 10%, and that is wrong. Now, people ask me, and again, this is thinking outside of the box. People say, well, Bernie, you know, you're a nice guy, you got white hair, you look like Santa Claus. You're giving away all of this free stuff. Free tuition in college, lowering student debt. How are you going to pay for it? All right, this is how we're going to pay for it. All of you remember that 8, 9 years ago, the greed and the recklessness and the illegal behavior on Wall Street drove this country into the worst economic downturn since the Great Depression. And what did Wall Street do? What Wall Street did is went begging to Congress, and they said to the taxpayers of America, oh, please bail us out. We'll be good boys. Just bail us out. And against my vote, that's what Congress did. We are where we are today. Wall Street is doing just fine. I believe we should impose a tax on Wall Street speculation. That tax would bring in more money than we need to make public colleges tuition free and to substantially lower student debt. If the American people can bail out Wall Street, Wall Street can help the middle class today. This campaign is listening to the Latino community. There are 11 million undocumented people in this country, and many of them are living in the shadows, and they are living in fear, and many of them who are at work are being exploited, because when you do not have legal rights, you're going to get cheated by your employer. A number of years ago, I was in a town called Immokalee, Florida, a small town where they grow much of the tomatoes used by McDonald's and Burger King. Literally on the day I came into that town, a contractor had been arrested on charges of slavery, holding people in involuntary servitude 8 years ago. Can you believe that? And I met with the workers who were working at terrible wages, terrible working conditions, terrible housing. They were being ruthlessly exploited. We were able to make some changes there and improve the situation. But all over this country, those conditions continue to exist. What we need in America is comprehensive immigration reform and a path toward citizenship. And if the Republican Party refuses to do its job in Congress and help us pass comprehensive immigration reform, I will use the executive powers of the presidency to do all that I can. In my view, we should end the current deportation policies. Our immigration policy should be to bring families together, not divide them up. Our immigration policy should be to bring families together, not divide them up. This campaign is listening to the African American community. And they are asking me a very simple but profound question. How does it happen that we have trillions of dollars to spend on a war in Iraq we never should have gotten into, but somehow we don't have the money to rebuild inner cities throughout this country? I have been to Flint, Michigan, where children were poisoned with lead in the water. I've been to Detroit, Michigan, where the public school system there is on the verge of a fiscal collapse. I've been to Baltimore, Maryland, where tens of thousands of people are addicted to heroin and cannot get the treatment they need. Instead of rebuilding communities in Afghanistan and Iraq, we've got to rebuild communities in the United States. This campaign is listening to a people whose pain is almost never heard, and that is the Native American community. All of you know that from before the time when this country became a country, when the first settlers came here, the Native American people were lied to, they were cheated, and the treaties they signed were broken. We owe the Native American American people a debt of gratitude that we can never fully repay. They have taught us some of the most important things that are part of our culture, including this lesson that we cannot fail to learn. And that is that as human beings, we are part of nature. We must coexist with nature. And that if we continue to destroy nature, our land, our water, our air, our climate, we are destroying ourselves. And one of the issues that I am very worried about, scientists are very worried about, is the issue of clean water in America and around the world. And that is why I believe we have got to end fracking. I am a member of the U.S. Senate Committee on the Environment. And I have talked to scientists all over this world. And what the scientists tell me is the debate is over. Climate change is real. Climate change is caused by human activity. And as you well know, in California, climate change is already causing major problems in our country and around the world. Are we ready to take on the fossil fuel industry? Are we ready to tell the fossil fuel industry that their short-term profits are not more important than the future of this planet? Are we ready to transform our energy system away from fossil fuel to sustainable energy and energy? Are we ready to have our country lead the world in combating climate change and saving the planet? What this campaign is about is asking people to look outside of the status quo and to ask hard questions. Question: how many countries are there in the entire industrialized world that do not guarantee health care to all of their people? Anyone know? You go to Europe, you go to the United Kingdom, you go to France, you go to Germany, you go to Holland, you go to Scandinavia. I live 50 miles away from Canada. All of those countries guarantee health care to every man, woman, and child in their countries. Now, I have been criticized for saying this, so I'll say it again. In my view, health care is a right of all people. In this country, whether you are young or old, rich or poor, every person must be able to go to the doctor or the nurse when they need to go. How many people here tonight, be honest about it, have no health insurance? Raise your hand. Wow. Wow. Does everybody know what it means not to have any health insurance? It means you do not go to the doctor when you should. It means if you have a serious accident, you're going to spend years paying off your hospital bill. How many people here have high deductibles and high copayments? That is an indication of a failed healthcare system. elected president together, we're going to pass a Medicare for all healthcare system. We are going to tell the private insurance companies they cannot make billions of dollars off people's sickness. We are going to tell the drug companies they will not continue to rip us off and charge us the highest prices in the world. Here is crazy. You want to hear crazy? Crazy is when 1 out of 5 Americans who go to the doctor and get a prescription cannot afford to fill that prescription. That's crazy. Crazy is when senior citizens cut their pills in half because they don't have enough money to buy the medicine they need. That's crazy. Crazy is when the top 5 drug companies in our country last year made $50 billion in profit. Well, we got news for the drug companies. Unelected president, they are no longer going to charge us the highest prices in the world. They are no longer going to rip off the American people. Everybody here knows that real change, and I mean real change in American society, has never taken place from the top on down. It has always taken place from the bottom on up. Now think about it. 100+ years ago, there were workers in California and in Vermont who were working 7 days a week. They could be fired at any minute. There were children of 10, 12 years of age working in factories, losing their hands and their fingers because they were around machinery they should not have been around. And what workers said with great courage is they stood up and they said, you know what, we're not animals, we are human beings, we want dignity on the job, we're going to form trade unions. And in many ways, the trade union movement and their courage to fight for decent wages and decent working conditions have given us the modern American middle class. In the midst of the abomination of slavery 150 years ago, there were African Americans and their allies who looked around them in horror and in disgust and said, we will someday make certain that in America we will end racism and segregation and violence. And we will never know how many people were killed in that struggle, how many people went to jail, how many people were beaten. But over the years, millions of people stood up and fought back against racism and bigotry. Now, the children of America probably don't know this, but 100 years ago, not a long time in historical context, 100 years ago, women in America did not have the right to vote, to get the education they wanted, or the jobs they wanted. 100 years ago, what the establishment said to women, they said, your job is to stay home and have babies. That's what you're meant to do. But women said, sorry, you are not going to define us. We will define and women and their male allies stood up and and said loudly and proudly that in America, women will not be second-class citizens. If we were in this room 10 years ago, not a very long time ago, and somebody would jump up and say, you know, Bernie, I think that in the year 2015, gay marriage will be made legal in every state in the country. Now think about it. Somebody said that 10 years ago, the person next door would have said, you're crazy, that can't happen. It can't happen because there's too much homophobia, there's too much bigotry in America. It just can't happen. But because of the courage and the determination of the gay community and their straight allies, they stood up, and let me tell you something, it took a lot of guts to do this, but they stood up and they said that in America, people should have the right to love whoever they want, regardless of their gender. If we were in this room 5 years ago, no time at all, somebody jumps up and says, you know, Bernie, this federal minimum wage of $7.25 an hour, it's a starvation wage, it's ridiculous. We have got to raise that minimum wage to $15 an hour. Person next to him, you know what he would have said 5 years ago? He would have said, you're crazy. You want to more than double the minimum wage. You're a radical. You're an extremist. Maybe we can go to $8 an hour, maybe even $10 an hour, $15 an hour. You're dreaming. But you know what happened? Workers in the fast food industry, in McDonald's, in Burger King, in Wendy's, you know what they said? They went out on strike, and they told this country they cannot live on $7.25 an hour. And then all over the country, people started hearing them. And I was on demonstrations with these guys. I listened to their story. I was in Detroit. Listen to this. People in Detroit, $7.25, they can't even get 40 hours a week, 20 hours a week. They get in a bus, they go to another McDonald's, 20 hours a week at $7.25, they go to a third McDonald's. That is not a way to live in America. They stood up, they fought back, and you know what happened? Up in Seattle, Washington, $15 an hour. In LA and San Francisco, $15 an hour. In New York State and California, $15 an hour. So what is my point? My point is that the only way we make real change is when people stand up by the millions, fight back, and demand that change. That's it. I have been all over this country. I've been from Maine to here in California, and this is what I have observed. All over this country, people are beginning to ask themselves, how does it happen? Why does it happen that I'm working 2 or 3 jobs, and all of the wealth and income of the country is going to the top 1%? Why does it happen that we have the highest rate of childhood poverty of almost any major country, at the same time we're seeing a proliferation of millionaires and billionaires? Why does it happen that when millions of people are unemployed, our infrastructure is collapsing? Why does it happen that women continue to make 79 cents on the dollar compared to men? Why does it happen that we continue to have a corrupt campaign finance system which allows billionaires to buy elections? Why does it happen that we are the only major country on earth not to guarantee paid family and medical leave? Why does it happen that we continue to have a broken immigration system? Why does it happen that millions of Americans continue not to have health insurance? And all over this country, people are beginning to look around and they say, wait a minute, we're not a poor country, we are a rich country. But the wealthiest people cannot and should not get it all. What this campaign is about. This campaign is based on social justice, economic justice, racial justice, environmental justice. On June 7th, there is going to be a very, very important primary, Democratic primary here in California. What I have learned throughout this campaign is that when the voter turnout is high, when working people come out in big numbers, when young people come out in big numbers, we win. Up to now, we have won in 20 states throughout this country. And if there is a large voter turnout on June 7th, California is going to be number 21. California is the most important state in terms of the Democratic nominating process. 475 delegates are up. If we can win here big in California on June 7th, if we can win in the other 5 states that are up, we're going to go into the Democratic Convention with enormous momentum. We are going to go in with momentum and we're going to come out with the Democratic nomination. And if we come out with the Democratic nomination, Donald Trump is toast. And it is one of the most progressive. On June 7th, let this great state tell the world you are prepared to go forward with a political